Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Holosun 507C version 2 with the ACSS Vulcan reticle. One of the things I hear frequently as a handgun instructor, specifically for the red dot handgun, is initially when moving over from iron sights to the red dot on the pistol, acquiring the dot on the draw stroke is problematic. And for some people it's so frustrating, especially if you don't have some good instruction or some good advice from anybody, that people try it out and they don't like it and then they put it away. So coming up with a solution that can help people acquire the dot more readily is something we're always looking for. There are a few really solid concepts and principles, teaching methodologies if you will, that are going to help people acquire that dot on their draw stroke, or coming from a less atypical position like a reload or clearing a malfunction, or from a high ready or low ready, or any other position where you'd have to reacquire or acquire the dot for the first time. Though those techniques sometimes have to be professionally instructed under a professional's eye to make sure someone's doing them correctly, and not everybody can just jump into a class whenever they want to, especially right now, 2021, ammo being what it is. It can be a little bit more difficult to reach out and seek professional instruction because you may be able to afford the class, but you may not be able to afford the ammo or the round count that that class is going to require. Outside of that, we're always going to spend more time working on our own personal skill development than we are going to spend under professional instruction. So any kind of device that's going to aid us in building that proficiency is going to be advantageous. But of course the argument can be brought up, well, is the technology or the technique going to introduce a quote-unquote crutch into the shooter's skill set? Now you may be wondering why the big preamble for a reticle on an optic. Well, the reticle that they've come up with, the ACSS Vulcan, gives the shooter a guide, if you will, to acquiring the dot from those atypical positions or from the draw stroke. Basically what you get is you get a TIM MOA Delta reticle, and on the outside of that reticle you have a guiding circle. When properly presented, when the gun is actually properly presented with the reticle centered in the window, you do not see it. However, if your alignment is to the left or right or top or bottom, you get a guiding circle that tells you, okay, you need to go opposite this direction to reacquire the reticle or to acquire the reticle in the window. Why is that advantageous? Well, prior to this, one of the methods that people talked about when acquiring the reticle was, well, just use your iron sights, align those, and then find your dot or your reticle, which is inefficient. It does work, but it slows you down, and it kind of goes against the whole guiding principle of what makes the red dot advantageous. Now with proper practice and dedication, you're going to develop what we call proprioceptive alignment, that eye-hand coordination and that body's natural ability to align the gun properly to acquire the dot consistently almost 100% of the time. But that takes time and repetition. So if you're just getting into a red dot, a reticle like this can be very advantageous. Now at the moment, this reticle is housed in the 507C. If you look deeper in the channel, you'll find a review I did on the 507C. This is the latest version of it with some slight changes that have been made. What you're getting is a optic with a RMR footprint that has a 7075 aluminum body that has dual power options. It's solar powered, battery powered, or a dual power mode with a maximum battery life of 50,000 hours off of a 1632 battery. That battery is side load, so you don't have to remove the optic and potentially lose your zero in order to change the battery, which is very advantageous. Housing the ACSS reticle in the Holosun, I think, is a smart idea because it is a more budget-friendly, durable, venerable optic. I've been using Holosun for a while now, and I've been very impressed with the overall quality that I've seen from the optics that I have. Of course, we have to allow that any electronic device is going to have problems, so it's probably wouldn't be too difficult to find, just like any optic, somebody who's had a problem with it. In my personal experience, the 507C is a really good entry-level optic and also a really good concealed carry optic, or if you have to, a duty carry optic. Now, this review is only about the reticle. That's the only thing I was looking at because I've already previously taken a look at the 507C. In fact, my original 507C is still going strong with a very high round count. So I'm just looking at the reticle's performance in this video. It does perform as advertised. At this point in my skill set, it's very rare for me to have an issue with acquiring the dot upon draw stroke or coming from a low ready or a high ready or from a reload or from something like that. However, the benefits of that guiding circle, the border, the outline, the bumpers, the training wheels, whatever you want to call them, are immediately apparent. It helps predict and allow you to develop the alignment. Something that people are going to bring up, and has already been brought up, is people are going to use a reticle like this as a crutch, and they're never going to develop that skill. Well, what is a crutch? A crutch is something you use to assist in walking until you can walk on your own. So I don't necessarily look at this as something that people are going to use to keep them lazy. Of course, the possibility is there. Malingering is a thing, and so is using training wheels much longer past when you should have stopped using them. So it's very possible for a shooter to start using this reticle and get kind of lazy with their presentation and just stick with, well, you know, the circle's always going to tell me how to align the reticle, so I'm never going to really worry about developing that skill set. So that possibility is very real. That's on the individual shooter. I like the fact that this reticle exists because it's going to get people who might not otherwise be interested in using a red dot to reconsider or to consider the possibility of adopting a red dot for their handgun, for their carry gun, or for their duty gun, which my feeling at this point, everyone needs a red dot on their handgun. Iron sights are now backup sights. The argument can be made, well, you know, you need to learn iron sights first, which I think is complete garbage. The thing about iron sights is they're a sighting system. Red dot, it's a sighting system. It's an advantageous sighting system. It's a more natural sighting system. So for me, the fundamental of sight alignment, sight picture is applied to whatever the sighting system is, be it iron sights or red dot. The red dot shows us things that the iron sight can't for our skill development, because we get that constant feedback of data that the iron sights just can't provide us, because they do this. And our eyes don't do this fast enough to track that data when the sights are going through the reciprocation of the slide and so on and so forth. So getting a new shooter to use a reticle like this and showing them, hey, it's intuitive and it's going to help you develop your proper presentation is much more beneficial than hoping they stick with it on their own using a traditional circle reticle. Now, the ACSS Delta reticle itself does have some ranging options. If you're going to take it on a handgun or use it on a rifle, you do have a distance estimation possible based on the reticle design. My thing about it, though, is I'm not a fan of the Delta on a handgun. I feel like the reticle takes up way too much room over what I'm trying to shoot at. At 3, 5, 7 yards, no big deal. When I get back to 15, 20, 25, depending on my desired point of impact, that reticle covers up a lot of what I'm trying to hit. So for me personally, let me say that again, for me personally, I would like to see this reticle also offered with a smaller traditional circle dot reticle, such as maybe a 2 or a 1 MOA dot. In my life, I prefer the smallest reticle possible that's still going to be visible in all the conditions I'm going to use it in. So 2 MOA is a pretty standard size from Holosun, but I also like the 1 MOA options that you see from some of the other RDS manufacturers. I also, of course, have to recognize that not everything is about me, which I will freely admit. The Delta reticle can also lend itself very well to the same kind of category of shooters. One of the things we see with the smaller dots for newer red dot shooters is the smaller the dot is, the more exaggerated that natural movement is. The same movement's present there with iron sights, but people tend to notice it more with the red dot because the red dot seems to float disconnected from the gun. So when you're presenting and you're aiming, you see that dot doing its moving around thing, and it can be a little overwhelming, it can be a little intimidating. Delta reticle, size that the Delta reticle is, and its shape lends itself very well to not translating as much as that movement to your perception. So the gun feels more stable because visually you're not seeing the same degree of travel with a 10 MOA reticle versus a 1 or a 2 MOA dot. This is probably the first time I've done a review on just a reticle. Usually I'm reviewing the optic and I talk about the reticle that's in it. I still did my same 2,000 round process. Been using this ever since it was sent to me, and I've been very impressed using it in just my general practice. Under low light, under night vision, especially under night vision, I found it had some very interesting qualities. And this is a small niche of those of you who are watching this video who shoot. There's not a lot of people comparatively who shoot handguns under night vision, but I found that I got this almost HUD display. In traditional daylight shooting at full presentation with good alignment, I don't see the guide reticle. I don't see that big circle. Under night vision, because the night vision extends away from your face, which places it closer to the gun, I actually do get to see that circle. So it gives me almost like a fighter pilot HUD, which I found that was very interesting. It does have night vision settings, which are very advantageous. However, just shooting under night vision with night vision settings, one of the philosophies that I like to apply to that concept is at some point you're probably going to want to go to white light. So if your optic is set in a night vision mode and you transition from night vision to white light, you're then going to have to make an adjustment on your optic. So just leave it in a low light setting, so when you do make that transition, you can actually see your reticle when you turn on your white light. Under daylight and low light conditions, the optic performs very well. The cleanliness of the Holosun, and in this case the ACSS Vulcan reticle, doesn't leave a lot of scatter or refraction in the actual optic reticle presentation performance. It looks really clean, almost like a holographic optic, or I'd say a holographic reticle. So in varied lighting conditions, I don't get these blooming effects like I see from some of the optics that are out there based on what type of LED emitter they use. And of course, even though it is a larger optic, or say a larger reticle, you can still use it for those more precise presentations, more precise accuracy. And it lends itself very well to rough range estimation, as well as shooting just as fast as you'd be able to shoot on a 1, a 2, or 3.25 or 6.5 MOA reticle, whatever your normal traditional circle reticle is. You're not going to see too much of a issue making the transition from one reticle to the other, except like I mentioned, at distance, that delta reticle can start to cover up some of your target or a lot of your target, depending on how precise or how small you're shooting. So for me, this is definitely an optic reticle I'm going to recommend. I'd like to see this reticle make it into more optics. I think Primary Arms has something really, really good here. The design behind it is intuitive and thoughtful, and it's something that can be put into any reticle that's willing to, or I say any optic that's willing to accept it. Putting this into RMRs or SIGs or whoever would be willing to accept this reticle into their optic, I think is a brilliant idea, because prior to this reticle existing, no one was taking this type of approach specifically. So because the reticle is available, I would like to see this reticle offered in every optic that's out there, because at this point people get down to preference, because there's already a lot of good reliable optics on the market, so we're getting down to brand loyalty. So if this optic reticle was available in those brands that you might choose, it's going to be more beneficial. This is something that every instructor should have available for their students to try out, especially if you're teaching people at the very beginning of red dot use, because some people don't recognize and realize when they go to their first class that the red dot on the rifle and the red dot on the handgun only share some similar characteristics, but there are some definitive differences that have to be addressed as well. So over the 2,000 rounds shooting this reticle, I got a really deep appreciation for what I already knew, but also what I need to understand that my students may not necessarily know or be proficient with yet. The caveat, of course, the disclaimer is, I already said, there is a danger in allowing this to be the way you do it. So if you're going to pursue this reticle, and if you're new to red dot shooting, I'd highly recommend you get one. Just be aware that at some point you need to work on developing the proficiency independent of the training wheels, if you will. Don't let that crutch become a permanent thing. That being said, if this is the only reticle you're ever going to use, that might not be something you're necessarily going to worry about. But this reticle lends itself very well to atypical shooting, and it's going to give you the confidence you need to get back the skill you feel like you lost when you came over from iron sights to red dot. And then you'll see, like the rest of us who've been shooting red dots for quite some time have seen, you actually get better because the red dot allows you to shoot more naturally. So if you're curious about the ACSS Vulcan reticle, I highly recommend you get one. Even if you've been shooting red dots for a while, this is something, like I said, good to have on hand for other people to try out, or to give you a different way to approach future skill development. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.